Climate-smart agricultural practices are gaining importance as a way to address the global climate crisis and achieve net zero carbon emissions. Researchers at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign are advancing our understanding of ways in which we can promote adoption of climate-smart agricultural practices and illustrate the benefits to farmers from increasing soil health, regenerating the soil, and increasing crop yields. We need to study ways in which we can provide incentives to farmers to adopt these practices, as well as understand the barriers that they currently face. In order to understand the diverse perspectives of various stakeholders, the Institute for Sustainability, Energy and Environment at the University of Illinois is organizing a critical conversation in Chicago. We seek to bring diverse stakeholders to share their perspectives and improve our understanding of the opportunities and the barriers to climate-smart agriculture.
As Environmental Defense Fund thinks about climate-smart agriculture, it involves two main goals. One is to mitigate climate pollutants from agriculture. Then at the same time, agriculture also needs to build its resilience to the impacts of climate change that are already occurring. All of those effects obviously impact farmers and the crops and livestock that they grow. And in order to maintain food production, we also need to build resilience to those ongoing impacts.
And given what we've seen this summer, from wildfire smoke impacting the Chicago air quality to droughts and floods across the country, there could not be a more important time to have this critical conversation. And I would add one other factor that is a critical conversation going on in Congress right now is around the Farm Bill and our federal policy for our food and agricultural system, in which climate change and the investments to help farmers address climate change and build resiliency against climate change are on the table, and a critical conversation built around what those policies will look like, how those investments will either be built upon and continue or reduced and spent somewhere else is a big part of it. So one of the challenges we're facing is how do we adapt and how do we invest in farming and farmers to help resolve this, help build resiliency. And a great example of some innovation in that space has been the ClimateSmart Commodities Partnership Program that the USDA announced about a year or so ago, in which grants have gone out and funding is going out to help boost research applied to commodities and applied to the way we produce commodities in a more climate smart or more climate friendly set of practices.
A climate-smart commodity is any commodity that's produced using climate-smart practices. That will depend on the region and the commodity. So perhaps climate-smart livestock is endeavoring to reduce methane emissions. Climate-smart grains would be focused on reducing nitrous oxide use, to improving soil health by using things like no-till and cover crops, and also diversifying crop rotations to help build resilience to increasing climate impacts.
The University of Illinois is home to world-leading climate science, particularly when it comes to how agriculture influences and can be influenced by the climate. What we've learned over the last 50 to 100 years here is how to grow the calories that help the world survive in a range of climate conditions. But where we're going next is how we manage this land and those calories to help the world thrive. So we think not only about how we manage our crops, but how we manage the whole ecosystem and the economy that goes with it to increase the health and the wealth of our communities. In the Illinois Regenerative Agriculture Initiative, we work with farmers and with other stakeholders in the supply chain to think about those risks and work towards solutions that allow us to capitalize on the opportunities that always come with those risks. I mean, Chicago is home to some of the major multinational ag corporations in the world. This is ground zero for where we grow crops and where the money from those crops goes. At this conversation, I'm excited to learn more about where that money goes and how more of it can stay here.
It's one of the first questions that a farmer will ask you. They may want to adopt new practices, but any change requires some measure of cost and risk. I've been working on agriculture and at EDF for 12 years, and I have seen a very significant shift during that time. I think the biggest shift has been that farmers are really feeling those impacts. And because of that, We now have much more interest and engagement by organizations throughout the agricultural system to figure out what to do about it.
To make climate-smart commodity become a reality, we have to have the quantification tools to quantify the outcomes of the climate-smart practice. If you are asking farmers to grow cover crops, and so farmer did this action, but can we quantify the outcome out of this cover crop practice? How much soil carbon the cover crop actually sequestrated over the time? Another example, if you are applying smarter fertilizer use application, then you have to quantify how much fertilizer you may saved in applying, but at the same time, you want to quantify the reduced N2O emission as well as the leaching. And all of that matters because all of these metrics will ultimately come to become so-called carbon intensity score at every individual field. And they vary from field to field because of the environment, because of the practice, because of the history of the field. At University of Illinois, we are really the pioneering scientists actually enable one of the most advanced technology to quantify this carbon intensity. We call it system of systems solution, in which case we combine the use of satellite remote sensing, ground truth sensors, and models and supercomputers, glue them all together to comprehensively measure field scale carbon intensity score. And we believe this type of the innovation really builds the foundation to enable climate-smart commodity.
Climate change is the biggest threat to agriculture, yes. Farmers depend on predictable weather and on natural resources in order to grow crops and livestock. And the pace of adaptation is just not keeping up with the pace that the climate is changing. So we're in a critical period both to bring down emissions and to really accelerate efforts to build resilience to the impacts of climate change that are already happening.